In an interview with the New York Times, the head of the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, Kirill Budanov, announced that Russia will commence a new offensive north of Kharkiv towards the Sumy region within the next 3 or 4 days. The situation is on the brink. Every hour the situation is edging closer to critical. Hey, my name is Alex, and this is a quick update on the Russian-Ukrainian war from the perspective of someone living within it. Additionally, the head of the main intelligence directorate emphasized the trend towards stabilization of the situation in the Kharkiv region has emerged. In other words, the adversary is already blocked at the front lines they managed to reach. The Ukrainian defense forces are conducting operations to further stabilize and begin pushing the adversary beyond our state borders. Meanwhile, Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, Litvinenko, reported that there were about 50,000 Russian troops on the border with Kharkiv. Currently, over 30,000 are advancing. And now, let's move on to the overview of the situation on the front line. It worth noting that we will discussing the changes on the front line over the past 2 days. Kharkiv sector of the front. In the footage, the first minutes of the Russian advance in the Kharkiv region are depicted. Ukrainian soldiers shared episodes of repelling attacks in the initial moments of the Russian advance in the Kharkiv region.
Кто тут?
In the Liptsius direction, Russian forces have consolidated control of the Glibokis settlement, occupied territory in the Protasiev forest, and captured the village of Lukyantsy. The enemy advancement in this sector extends up to 9.3 kilometers wide and 2.2 kilometers deep. Active combat operations continue. Additionally, information regarding the village of Zilina clarified that it remains under full control of defense forces. There are no enemy forces in this settlement. The video shows strikes by FPV drones by the Pevrun infantry unit of the 42nd Mechanized Brigade on the enemy infantry in the triangle of Oleynikove, Lukyantsy, Gliboki. There is also a video of a counterattack by Ukrainian defense forces on the western outskirts of the same village. During the counterattack, Russian soldiers were captured. Ukrainian soldiers are seen treating the wounded Russian captive with compassion, as one applies a bandage to the injured Russian prisoner. And in these frames, the destruction of Russian golf enthusiasts who were transporting military equipment along the same road is shown. Soldiers from the Sharp Corps unit of the 2nd Separate Detachment of the Special Purpose Central Omega are carrying out the operation. Work is also being done on enemy logistics. Ukrainian fighters identified an enemy convoy and effectively halted it with a precise strike on the first vehicle. Artillery units ensured the job was completed, destroying the rest. On the Vovchansk direction, the enemy entered the central part of the village of Bukhrovatka and advanced towards the northern outskirts of Vovchansk. The advancement of the Russian army is recorded in the sector up to 5.8 kilometers wide and 3.4 kilometers deep. In the village of Bukhrovatka, defense forces attacked enemy infantry with drone strikes near the intersection of Sadova and Zarichna streets. Artillery and mortars are also in operation. Footage shows mortars shelling off one of the enemy groups in this village. Work by Ukrainian border guards. City of Vovchansk. Footage shows a view of Vovchansk from bird-eye perspective. Enemy assault groups attempt to enter the city from 2 directions. From the east, operators of strike drones target Russian positions in the area of Vovchansk. The video shows bomb drops on a building within the enemy infantry in the northeast outskirts of the city. And from the north, footage shows BTR-82A of the RDC fighters in the northern part of Vovchansk, eliminating Russian infantry attempting to entrench itself on the territory of the meatpacking plant. these frames, fighters from the 57th and 71st Brigades of the Ukrainian Armed Forces destroyed 2 tanks in Vovchansk, approximately in the same northern areas of the city. And in this video, Russian prisoners of war captured in the same directions as seen, adding to the exchange fund. Active combat operations continue. Kupiansk sector of the front. A high tempo of combat operations persists southwest of Yahidne, where a slight advancement of the Russian army is observed, as well as in the area of Klishchiivka. Somewhere in this area, a column of enemy vehicles and infantry attempting to break through in the Kharkiv region has been destroyed. Forces from unit of the 3rd Assault Brigade and neighboring 66th Separate Motorized Brigade and 77th Mechanized Brigade decisively destroyed enemy tanks and BMP-2 infantry fighting vehicles. The enemy was scattered by strikes from assault drones and brigade artillery. 3 units of enemy equipment were irretrievably destroyed, and 4 more were damaged. Some of the enemy personnel dispersed by a portion were located and neutralized, eliminating approximately a platoon of Russian infantry, not including the crew of vehicles. In the same sector, the destruction of Russian armored vehicles, as well as Grad multiple rocket launcher, is recorded. Soldiers from the 14th Separate Mechanized Brigade are operating. On the Svatove sector of the front, no advancement of the Russian army are recorded. In the settlement of Karmazinivka, the destruction of a Russian Novna S is captured on this video. A little further south, in the area of Novovodyane, the destruction of a Russian tank garage is recorded. As seen in the video, the garage welded onto the tank didn't offer much protection. The tank was destroyed by kamikaze drones as before. Liman direction. Active combat operations are taking place east of Terny, Siversk direction. The enemy continues its attempts to advance into Serebryansky forest and Bilohorivka. No changes are recorded. Footage shows the destruction of Russian armored vehicles in the area of the settlement of Bilohorivka. The video is from the soldiers of the Black Raven group of the 81st Separate Airborne Brigade. And in this footage, Serebryansky forest shown. The scenes are like something out of fantasy movie, akin to Avatar, for example. The guys aren't joking when they call this forest enchanted. Chasiv Yar section. The video shows how border guards of the Pomsta offensive brigade stopped a Russian mechanized assault in this direction, destroyed a tank and an APC. The rest of the Russian combat vehicles fled. Drone operators of the armed forces of Ukraine attacked with drone drops an enemy small assault group on the eastern outskirts of the village of Kalinivka. The enemy occupied an area up to 580 meters wide and 650 meters deep. On this direction, the enemy continues attempts to advance and consolidate on the territory of Dachas, north of the Canal microdistrict. In the eastern part of Chasiv Yar, the enemy, with the support of armored vehicles, continues assault action along the Lina Street, near the multi-story building. The Russian army also attempts to advance in the western part of the Styupki-Holyubovsky 2nd Reserve and in the southern part of Ivanivsky. The Black Swan unit shares footage of a destroyed enemy armored column northwest of Ivanivsky. Currently, the enemy is being destroyed even on the approaches to the city, not allowing it to get closer. And in this footage, another batch of Russian equipment is depicted on the same direction. As we can see, the Russians are burning, dying, but still advancing. However, significant advancements have not been recorded in this area over the past months. On the Avdiivka direction, in the northern part there are no enemy advancement recorded, although the enemy attempts to push in various directions. Activity is recorded in the area of Solovyovo village. The strike drones company set up a real bonfire for several dozen occupiers who decided to hide in a barn. They all stayed there forever now. this footage, the M2A2 Bradley, FPV drones and cluster munition are showcased in action. The result is the destruction of an enemy MTLB carrying infantry, as it advanced towards the village of Sokil, which is under the control of other forces. In the southern part of this direction, the enemy continues assault action on the southern outskirts of Umansky and towards Yasnobrodivka. The situation is under clarification. South of Pervomaisky, Russian forces have occupied the remaining 3 strips of forest in a sector up to 1.4 kilometers wide and 1.5 kilometers deep. Soldiers of the 3rd Airborne Assault Battalion of the 25th Separate Airborne Brigade share footage of another burning Russian tank in the same direction. To stop the enemy, the use of Stugna anti-tank missile system of Ukrainian production is recorded here. The anti-tank specialists of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade Magyura are in action. Kharkiv direction. Heavy fightings continue in Krasnogorivka. The enemy has had some minor success north of Central Street. Photo of destroyed Russian tank garage near Krasnogorivka. East of Krasnogorivka, in Staromykhailivka, the Ukrainian Defense Forces conducted a strike with a GDAM on enemy positions at the bricks factory. It is worth noting the accuracy, one projectile right on target, in contrast to Russian weaponry, which often misses the mark. For example, the Russians released a video showing 3 failed attempts to hit the Ukrainian Defense Forces vehicles with an Iskander missiles. We are very lucky that their aim is often off, otherwise the situation would be much more difficult for us now. Vuhledar direction. The Russians made another unsuccessful attempt to attack in the area of Novomykhailivka, without success. In the video, episodes of repelling a Russian mechanized assault towards the village of Novomykhailivka are shown. The Russian engaged 70 units of armored vehicle in this attack. 4 tanks, 6 infantry fighting vehicles, and an armored repair and recovery vehicle were destroyed. The remaining Russian vehicles fled. The Russians also confirmed the failed attack in their chats. Velikonovoselivsky direction. Enemy infantry entrenched in Staromayorsk along Lina Kostenko Street to a depth of 230 meters and advanced east of the city. Robotina sector. The enemy advanced east of Verbovo. In this video, the destruction of BMP 2nd with its crew is depicted. Work of the Ronin unit of the 65th Brigade, Zaporizhzhia direction. Overall, Russia has not demonstrated any particular creativity in recent days, and as always, indiscriminately attacked Ukraine with Iranian drones and its own missiles and bombs. In Kharkiv, apartments from the 9th to the 13th floor were damaged in a high-rise residential building as a result of a strike. Similarly, an attack on a residential building was recorded in Kherson. Rocket casing like this were found scattered in Kharkiv yards after the attack. Ukraine responded with strikes on military and imported industrial targets. As a result of a drone attack in Kotlyuban, Volgograd region, Russia, a freight train derailed. Additionally, the Baalbek airfield in occupied Crimea was targeted with ATACMS missiles. It is approximately 280 kilometers from the front line. Apparently, the focus was again on destroying radar systems and air defense. The photo allegedly shows the result of the strike on the airfield. It is reported that at least 1 MiG-31 jet and 2 air defense systems were destroyed. Russians confirm the effectiveness of the attack in their chats. Regarding the attack on the ammunition depot in the Krasnodon, about which I reported in the previous issue, Russia claimed that 3 ATACMS ballistic missiles were launched, 2 of which hit the target and only 1 was intercepted. However, judging from the video, all 3 missiles hit the target. The defense of the area with a large ammunition depot was protected by the Panzer S-1, Buk M3, S-300 or 400 systems, and as we can see, they all failed to perform their job effectively. Also, let's briefly go over other news related to the war in Ukraine. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken arrived in Kyiv on an unannounced 2-day visit to assure Ukrainians of US support. He promised that assistance from allies would be provided, emphasized the need for Ukraine to mobilize and carry out reforms rather than imitating them to avoid becoming like Russia. And at the end he played the guitar in a Kyiv restaurant. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz announced that military aid totaling more than 7 billion euros would be provided to Ukraine in 2024. Also, Olaf Scholz announced the transfer of a third Patriot system to Kyiv. Meanwhile, Putin arrived in China to pay homage to his emperor. There he reiterated his readiness for negotiation, but with consideration of the situation on the ground. In other words, he says, "Give me what I have seized." Kyiv responds through the words of Andrei Kovalenko, the head of the Center of Counter-Disinformation of National Security and Defense Council, who stated that Russia is beginning to push the negotiation and that Putin will be willing to put the border of Kharkiv region on the negotiation table. It is clear that there will be no negotiation. Russia is requesting negotiation solely for a temporary pause and to gather forces for further attacks, emphasized Kovalenko. He stressed that the task for Ukraine this year is to stand firm. At the same time, the New York Times also published an article about possible negotiation between Russia and Ukraine this summer to end the war, using a conditional Korean scenario. Also, discussions about reshuffles in the Russian government are actively underway. However, I believe this is not so important as long as Putin remains in power. It won't have much influence on the war in Ukraine. What is more important to me is, for example, the change in the commander responsible for the defense of Kharkiv, where the Russian army is trying to advance. Mikhailo Drapati has been appointed to command the Kharkiv Operational Tactical Group. This is a very good appointment. A person who in 2014 refused to surrender and led his battalion out of encirclement, taking several units with him along the way. This person understands the cost of mistakes very well, so let's wish them success in his difficult task. And that wraps up today's video. If you found this information helpful or somehow insightful, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye!